Tonight on BNC Live, after a disturbing rise in hate crimes against Asian Americans, the Biden administration is calling for action. What the president is doing to speed up the federal government's response. And blended cultures in the nation. Our Jane Mark shares her story growing up Black and Asian in America, the survival skills needed to manage it. Plus, history in the making. East Africa elects its first woman president, how her appointment is empowering women across the African continent. BNC Live starts right now. Good Saturday evening, and thank you for joining us here for BNC Live. I'm Brittany Jones. In our top story tonight, President Joe Biden says hate crimes against Asian Americans have skyrocketed since the coronavirus started to spread in the U.S. just over a year ago. Now his administration is calling for action. Asian Americans shaken by the shootings in Atlanta and a rising tide of hate sparked by the coronavirus pandemic.
The whole Asian fever, it made me feel gross, like I couldn't be comfortable in my skin.
There's no desire to see me as a person. There's no desire to get to know me. It's purely like, I've made up my mind about who you are, and I hate you for it.
President Biden wants Congress to pass a COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, which he says will speed up the federal government's response to the rise in violence and discrimination against Asian Americans.
And violence often hide in plain sight. It's often met with silence. That's been true throughout our history, but that has to change.
The president speaking in Georgia, where shootings targeting spas in the Atlanta area left 8 people dead this week, including 6 women of Asian descent. And calls are growing for hate crimes charges to be filed against the suspect.
Certainly during the pandemic, there has been a lot of market increase in violence against Asian Americans, against the most vulnerable of our population, a lot of elderly people, that, we really feel like that finally we are being heard and that we're visible.
And our mental health and wellness expert, Jane Marks, is with me now to share some interesting perspective on this. Jane, good evening.
Oh, good evening, Brittany.
And so, Jane, you're actually Black and Asian. Not sure if everyone knew this about you, but what was your reaction when you first heard about the deadly shootings in Atlanta? And did it immediately bring up some old memories with your family?
Well, quite frankly, when I heard it, I was shocked. I was not shocked that, again, it was another shooting, but I was shocked about the focus of it. And I think, like so many people of Asian descent, it was frightening. Again, we were appalled by it. And what it did was it exposed so much that has been there for so long. We just don't know about it. Asians, particularly having grown up in both the Black community and the Asian community, are very quiet about what's going on in their worlds and in their lives. The idea was simply to meld into society as quietly and seamlessly as you could. Again, you were to excel in your work. You were to be able to take care of your families and just go about your business and not cause any kind of attention being brought to you. And of course, the world's attention now is on the Asian community because of this most recent incident.
And so, Jane, this isn't something new. You talk about issues with Asian Americans being targeted, but it's certainly highlighted when such a tragedy like this happens, as you just mentioned. What were some of the worst stories you can remember that your family faced when we talk about racism and everything else?
Well, for not just for my family, but for a lot of families, it's a double whammy because it's double prejudice, because you're part Black and you're part Asian. And I can remember growing up the terminology. I can remember what we were called. I can remember people saying, well, there goes the China girls, or those yellow refugees need to go back to the rice paddies. And my father would always say, listen, you need to stand tall. And his way of dealing with it was to say, you're an American, you're going to sell, you're going to work harder, you're going to do better than everybody else. And I think that is symptomatic of the culture. It's always to work hard. It is that work ethic that keeps you above it all. But here's what happened in this particular case. This particular perpetrator targeted all these people who had these profound businesses and they were successful. This is at the heart of the Asian community. This is who you are. It is what you represent. It is your work ethic. It is what your calling is. And so, for President Biden to say, listen, we need to pay attention to it because there's so much that this country does not know about Asian culture, because Asians are very private. And you know, there's so many amazing things about Asian families and how successful they are, but you wouldn't know because they're very quiet. Now among, you know, each other, there's a lot of celebration, but it's also within the community and not necessarily with everyone else. When you get to know the culture, and that is one thing I have to say about my mother. My mother was this little Filipino lady who moved to this community here in the Southeast and was one of the first Asians to come to this area. And in doing so, you know, she was a firebrand. She says, you know what? Rather than feel bad about how people were treating you, she literally started the American organization, which grew to be an Asian experience that now includes some 14 countries. So, you know, here's a woman who says, you know what, I'm going to teach you. I'm going to show you what it's like. And that's what we were taught as children. We were taught to be survivors and strong, but most importantly, to be teachers. Now, not every family is like that, because most Asian families, like I said, are very private. And when it comes to mental health issues and the anxiety that they're experiencing right now, they're not going to be putting language on it and talking about it. They're going to be talking about it within the community. They will, you know, certainly a lot of the elderly people will tell their children, but they're not going to go to their neighbors and say, you know, I'm scared. I'm just so scared, or I need your help. There's not going to be that reaching out. It's going to have to be the other way around.
Do you remember, Jane, how your parents felt when some of these things would be said to your family?
Yeah, I remember my father. My father would, you know, what he would do is that he would say, don't pay attention to it, you know, remember. He would say things like, remember, you're like corn. This is a true story. You're like corn, you're like hybrid corn, you're strong, you can get through this. And that it didn't matter where it was coming from or who was saying it to you. You had to hold your head up high. You were never to cry. You were always to present, you know, the face of strength, never weakness. And so to that extent, you know, even though he was a psychologist, still, he didn't really understand the mental health implications either. You know, you just learn to survive. You have stronger survival skills because you have to get through it. If people talk to you or talk to you or in a condescending way or spit on you or tell you where you need to go, you have to ignore it. You have to act like you didn't hear it. You just muscle through it. And so when you talk to certainly older people of mixed race who have been through these kinds of experiences, they will tell you about multiple stories, but they will also tell you how strong they are because they didn't have a choice. It was not like they had another option. They had to just muscle through it.
I mean, just talking about and hearing you talk about those survival skills that your own family needed, like it's actually disheartening, but it's knowing that, you know, you guys were able to maintain that strength to even get you to where you are today.
But I think most families, that's what they do. They learn that in order to be able to get through it, it's not about some of the things that we talk about now when it comes to mental health. It's that you just have to push through it, and that it doesn't matter. In a lot of ways, it's almost like slavery in the days when people would say such horrible things to you or call you bad names. You can't pay attention to it because if you do pay attention, if you acknowledge it, and if you fight back, there could be so many repercussions. And unfortunately, the law historically has not been on your side. You didn't have resources to go through. Now, if President Biden does exactly what he says he does, which I'm so hoping for because it is the mental health issue, of course, which I preach about all the time. And that if you can put resources in these communities and access, and you know, in other words, you're going to have to reach out to the Asian community because here's an interesting fact, Brittany. I have been in practice for 53 years. And in 53 years, I've only had 4 Asian patients. And, you know, and that's sad when you think about it because so many years they've been targets of so many things. And, you know, whether it's, you know, again, sexual assault or robbery or being beaten, these kinds of things are simply not reported. And if there are mental health consequences, you just go to your family. You know, in other words, you don't take those steps. And so what I'm hoping is a whole new awareness for the Asian community in general, in just terms of, I'm so happy that we are just focusing so much positive attention on what can be done as opposed to what has been done, certainly over this last week.
And we know there certainly needs to be change. Well, I want to ask you about the person who is allegedly responsible for committing these heinous acts and killing those 8 people. You know, looking at his past, he was a church goer. He was someone who they said dealt with a sexual addiction. How does someone end up carrying allegedly that type of attack out just because of what they had been experiencing on the inside?
Well, you know, we don't really know what's been going on inside of this guy's head, although we know what he's saying at this point. But there could have been anger, there could have been a trigger, there could have been something that has happened, you know, within the last couple of weeks. And I think one of the things that is alarming to me specifically is that there's been so much language put on these hateful statements. I think certainly in the last years, so many people have felt like they've had permission to say things, to do things that are okay because it has come from the leadership over the last 4 years. And I think in a lot of cases, and I think like when I talk to other mental health professionals, we just feel like that people who were on the fringes, who had lots of mental health issues, felt like they had permission to make these decisions and to make these kinds of, you know, pivots because other people felt like they did, so that it was okay. Now, he could have decompensated. I mean, there could have been so many reasons. I don't think you can say specifically this is what happened to cause this, but certainly we're living in a time these last 4 years where people have felt like they've had permission to do things that historically we have not seen in those kinds of numbers. Whether it's shootings or whether it's beatings, it's just all this aggressive, angry behavior. And then you add the pandemic on top of it. And so what you have is the perfect storm for this kind of thing. And so that is why mental health education becomes so crucial at this point. And so, you know, each time you talk with me, of course, I'm always going to be talking about mental health because I think it's such a critical part of how we manage our lives on a daily basis.
All right. Well, Jane, thank you so much for showing your family story and what everybody else in the community is going through. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Well, meanwhile, a Kentucky man has pled guilty to federal hate crimes for shooting and killing 2 black people at a grocery store 2 years ago. Gregory Allen Bush admitted to killing Maurice Stollard, a 69-year-old black man, at close range while he and his grandson were shopping at a Kroger supermarket back in 2018. He also killed Vicki Lee Jones, a 67-year-old grandmother, in the parking lot of the store. Investigators say Bush's first target was a predominantly black church, but turned to Kroger when he wasn't able to get inside the church. Bush is scheduled to be sentenced in June. He faces a maximum sentence of life in prison without parole. Well, coming up on BNC Live, sexual misconduct claims against New York Governor Andrew Cuomo continues after another woman speaks out. His attorney's response just after the break. Stay with us. Health officials are concerned about a new variant spreading across the United States that appears to be more contagious and deadlier than other variants. According to the nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the B.1.1.7 variant, first discovered in the UK, was spotted in the U.S. in December. Since then, the variant has spread throughout the country.
This variant, as you know, is every day getting more and more dominant in our own country, and likely accounts now for about 20 to 30% of the infections in this country, and that number is growing.
And according to Johns Hopkins University, more than 29.7 million people have tested positive for COVID-19 in the U.S., and more than 541,000 people have died from the virus. There are more than 122 million confirmed cases globally, with more than 2.7 million deaths. Well, more people are rolling up their sleeves in the fight against COVID-19. More than 121 million doses of the vaccine have been administered in the U.S. That's according to data released today by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. That number represents about 77% of the more than 156 million doses delivered. The U.S. is averaging roughly 2.4 million daily doses administered in the latest 7-day average. The CDC says nearly a quarter of the country's population, about 79 million people, have received at least 1 dose of coronavirus vaccine, and about 43 million people are fully vaccinated. Well, new tonight, the mayor of Miami is now enforcing a curfew after partying goes out of bounds. The curfew begins tonight at 8, barricading South Beach's main party strips. No pedestrians or vehicles will be allowed to enter, and businesses in the area are all forced to close at 8 p.m. The mayor says the decision follows weeks of confrontations between police and large crowds, plus fights and occasional violence. One shooting actually turned deadly. The measure will be imposed for at least 72 hours. Well, listen to this. Parents, for those of you who are hoping to cash in on the newly increased child tax credit, you may have to wait a while. IRS Commissioner Charles Rettig says his agency may not be able to start paying those credits in July. That's the deadline the massive $1.9 trillion relief plan calls for. Rettig says the IRS is swamped with both the regular tax season and the $1,400 payments provided by the law, which the IRS is also handling. The new child tax credit increases the amount of money taxpayers can get for kids from $2,000 to $3,000 and $3,600 for kids under 6 years old. The relief law calls for those credits to be paid out in payments starting in July. Rettig says he can't even begin working on a portal for people to claim those credits until the newly extended tax filing deadline of May 17th passes. The U.S. House has now passed the American Dream and Promise Act. It now has to clear the Senate, but many civil rights advocates say this vote is a big win. BNC's San Francisco correspondent Ansur Hassan has more. A current aide to New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is the latest woman to accuse him of sexual harassment. Alyssa McGrath tells the New York Times that Governor Cuomo looked down her shirt and stared at her body during a one-on-one meeting. She says he commented on her appearance inappropriately and referred to her colleague and her as mingle mamas. Cuomo's attorney tells the Times that he's just old-fashioned and greets men and women with a kiss on the cheek. She reiterates her client's claim that he never touched any woman inappropriately.
And when we get back, we talk about the first day of
Welcome back to BNC Live. Well, a historic moment in Tanzania as the country elects its first woman for president. Samia Suluhu Hassan is bringing a striking change of leadership style to the East African nation.
We sense her gravitas, we appreciate her intellect. We look forward to, her calm and competent approach to politics. So, I mean, this is really big, I think, for women.
The 61-year-old was sworn in on Friday and assumes the presidency following the death of the late President John Magufuli, who died from heart disease. Well, Costa Rica could be the next hotspot for work and tourism. The country even has a project in Congress that would grant benefits to remote workers, meaning longer stays and a greater contribution to the local economy. If approved, digital nomads would obtain, among other benefits, a residence permit for 1 year. The permit can be renewed. They'll have the possibility of opening bank accounts and use their driver's license from their country of origin. And I know we all have that pandemic itch and ready for a quick vacay. Now a major cruise line right here is planning to set sail from the Bahamas just in time for your vacation, folks. But there is a catch to it. They're available only to adults who have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19 and those under age 18 who have tested negative for the virus. Royal Caribbean is making its 2021 return to the Caribbean with cruises from the Bahamas set to depart in June. All passengers on the 7-night cruises must meet Bahamas COVID-19 travel requirements, which could include taking additional tests before and after arrival. The cruise line says additional health and safety measures will be announced later. Royal Caribbean's sister line, Celebrity Cruises, is also getting on board with plans to set sail in June with fully vaccinated adult passengers and crew. The cruise industry was hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic last year as several ships across the world became sources of major COVID-19 outbreaks. For a second straight day, pandemic air travel is hitting a new high. More than 1.4 million people were screened at U.S. airports headed into the weekend, according to TSA. That represents the biggest day for air travel in more than a year. Previous records for pandemic flying have come Thursday and the previous Friday. This new high also represents a ninth straight day of more than 1 million daily passengers. The surge comes as federal health officials still caution against travel. The Department of Transportation has a new campaign to remind travelers of mask requirements on all forms of transportation and in terminals. Well, coming up on BNC Sports, we've got your HBCU football highlights covered, plus what legendary college basketball coach is our king of the hill tonight. Our James Hill is up next with your BNC Sports. It's Women's History Month, and as we continue to celebrate the accomplishments women have made throughout history, tonight we take a look at the impact Black women have made on mental health. This Self-Care Saturday on BNC, Dr. Jessica Smedley explains how Black women help lead the way in teaching self-care.
Well, Dr. Jessica Smedley, thank you so much for joining us for Self-Care Saturday.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Dr. Smedley, we women, I always say girl power. It's Women's History Month. We have made a tremendous impact on a number of different fields. But let's talk about mental health and wellness. How have, Black women made it such a tremendous impact on that industry?
Absolutely. So what we know about psychology right now is that 4% of psychologists are Black, and an even smaller amount are women. But we are seeing lots of us rise to the occasion. Many of us are spending time in writing and contributing to research. Many of us are advocating for policy change for our communities, for access to mental health. Many of us are advocating on even local levels, providing services, creating community support groups that are accessible, making mental health a normal topic per se. So using mediums like social media, blogs, making it every day, contributing to even pieces, such as this, and making sure the conversations are continuing. So there are so many different, ways that we are showing up in this time right now. It's really exciting.
And why is it so important to have people who look like us in those roles?
Representation is so important to our overall confidence, our self-esteem, our healing. Historically, we know that medicine and mental health have not been safe places for Black people, for people of color. And so now that we are seeing our numbers begin to rise and the interest grow in the field, it's so important that we help other people see that mental health is actually something normal that we should do and that we're worthy of doing, because we need to heal, we need to recover and take care of ourselves, and to target some of that generational trauma that we've been carrying for so long.
Yeah. And how does that relate to self-care? When you look at, me being able to go to a Black therapist, I have my own personally. How does that work well with you, just kind of instilling in you how to do self-care?
Absolutely. It's just an automatic boundary. It's saying that I'm going to take out this amount of time from my life once or twice a month, however often you see your therapist, and learn techniques to cope. Learn techniques to build healthy routines and habits. Make sure that you're engaging in healthy relationships and taking care of your body, your mind, your spirit, all of those things. So it's a trickle-down effect that just bleeds into all of our domains of life.
Yeah. And what does that look like for us when ultimately we're able to, take the time out for self-care, visit with a therapist, or however else we decide to do those routines? What does that look like?
Sure. So it can be, like I said, meeting with someone weekly. Right now, I'm even still virtual in my practice. And so taking time to explore maybe what past relationship stressors or issues that there have been, helping to develop insight, helping to develop new ways of understanding and new ways of self-acceptance, so that relationships going forward feel healthier, more fulfilling, developing healthier boundaries, new ways of engaging. And like you were saying earlier, taking care of ourselves first. Those priorities are so important.
Is there anything that, Black women in particular that you would make a recommendation for that you suggest that we do for our self-care?
We need to give ourselves a lot more grace than we do. I hear a lot of Black women tend to be apologetic for the way that we show up, or we're not good at celebrating ourselves internally. And so we downplay our achievements, or we are critical on, achievements rather than celebrating or owning our greatness. And so I think that how we speak to ourselves and that internal narrative is so important. Specifically for us, because of, again, as I was saying earlier, our past are so traumatic and we carry so much pain. But because of that, we have to learn how to heal and change that narrative. And it really starts inside.
Yeah. And what's been some of the things that you've kind of experienced with your clients that you've spoken to, with some of the weight that they carry?
Everything: relationship stress, self-care stress, feeling that their responsibilities are spread because they don't have, the support maybe, feeling that not only do I not have time to take care of myself, but it's also my partner or my children or, work, especially in a pandemic. And so just not feeling like they have ideal resources that would be helpful to really just manage in a more effective and healthy way.
And what message would you send to them with this being Women's History Month and we having to, make sure we are celebrated? What would you say?
To make sure that we take a step back and to look at the things that we are doing. What are the things that we do have, to reframe and to think about the resources and excellence that we see around us every day. And again, that's why changing that narrative is so important, because there are so many things that we overlook that we don't give ourselves credit for.
And lastly, what is your self-care tip of the week? What should people be doing?
I'm going to go with exercise. The weather is changing. I'm here in DC, and so today's the first day of spring. So I'm going to say go outside, exercise, get some fresh air. I don't care if it's walking, jogging, dancing, jump roping, just something physical to get that heart rate up and those endorphins pumped and stress hormones decreasing, smiling, getting that vitamin D, all that outside stuff.
Panama national basketball team. Coach Nolan Richardson is our BNC King of the Hill.
James, what was some of his most notable moments, I guess, out there on the basketball court that you can recall?
Just the fact that he was able to capture the second championship as a Black head coach. We watched John Thompson, Big John at Georgetown with Patrick Ewing and the guys back in '84 up in Seattle in the Dome. And then 10 years later in 1994, Coach Nolan Richardson won the SEC. He had a great ball club. They got to the big dance and they earned that trophy. They took that trophy back to Arkansas, to Fayetteville, and they had a good time with Razorbacks across their chest.
Sure, that's sometimes what's on the mind of these folks right now playing in March Madness.
Definitely. They're in the house right now trying to figure out how to make history.
All right. Thank you there, James. Going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Well, Atlanta, it was an easy, breezy, beautiful Saturday for you all, and a happy first day of spring. Now, temperatures are in the 70s for you all in Atlanta, going to be dropping down into the 50s for tonight, but those wind gusts still staying at 15 miles per hour, so a little gusty in Atlanta. And as we continue on, most of the country staying dry, getting a little bit warm. Now, we had cooler temperatures throughout the day today for, you all in Florida and for the South. Places like Macon, Georgia were warmer than Fargo, North Dakota, which is insane. Now, we have this low pressure hugging the coast right now and bringing a little bit of rain to the Carolinas and northern portions of Florida. Now, over to the west, we're still dealing with a system, a pesky system that's making its way on through. Now, throughout the week for tomorrow, throughout the week as we head into tomorrow and into Monday, now this system is going to be picking up and moving across the U.S. Now, low temperatures for tonight dropping down into the 40s for you all in Atlanta, 30s for you all over in Washington as well. And take a look at this, Cleveland, for your 7-day forecast. Staying a little bit warmer, like I said, in the Ohio River Valley, Midwest, 61 degrees, nothing but sunshine. Now, those temperatures getting into the 40s and then the 50s headed into Monday. Staying in the 60s, hint of rain here and there, but nothing going to wipe out your day. And for you all in New York City, sunshine, plenty of sunshine. Temperatures flirt with, the upper 50s as we head into Tuesday, and then getting into the 60s as we head into the rest of the weekend. But for you all in Miami, a beautiful forecast. Unfortunately, you said, Brittany, their curfew 8 p.m.
8 p.m. I mean, right now, I can imagine with the pandemic, little concerns there, or big concerns there about folks basically coming out there, and they said violence happening, fights, all sorts of stuff. So even those businesses right now are being forced to close at 8 o'clock as well, starting tonight.
But the party never stops in Miami. So 8 p.m., that's hard.
Yeah, and I'm almost wondering how they plan to monitor it, because I can see people moving the parties inside of Airbnbs or moving into their hotel rooms or something like that. So,
I don't know how the spring breakers, I've been watching them on Instagram, and it's been getting pretty crazy.
Right. And I mean, you talk about the gorgeous weather that's out there right now.
It's beautiful weather, so you're going to be wanting to be outside, and then, the warm weather sticks around into the nighttime, and unfortunately, you have to take the party on the indoor.
Yes.
But they'll find a way.
And I was going to say, first day of spring, I mean, typically is that somewhere where people flock to because they're hot weather, you got the warmer water?
Yeah, you have the warmer temperatures, warmer waters, of course, starting the water is starting to warm up, and so are the temperatures, Brittany. So everybody's flocking to Florida. This is just a place that you go to for spring break, especially because all the beaches, beautiful beaches at that, and especially down in Miami, not too far away from the Bahamas, same kind of water.
Same kind of water. That just reminds me of one of my friends. She's always like, well, if you go on vacation, it all kind of looks like, if you live in Florida, that Jamaican water would look the same, and then also just going over to
you get down there, it starts to be really clear where you can see everything, which is kind of scary too.
Yes. All right, so people listen out there, make sure you get inside by 8 p.m. So Brittany, okay, gentlemen, we're gonna get it out today. That's how it is.
On the gentlemen.
On the gentlemen, and it's hard for them when they get ready to get these words out. Will you marry me? So, ladies, if you love your sweetie, look at that ring right there. Well, if the gentlemen love those ladies, get down on that bended knee. It's National Proposal Day. So, some of those people who out there got nervous or whatever, trying to get those words out, like we were saying, gentlemen, we're talking to you. Some of these ladies are waiting for their spring proposal. This is also a time when people have many of their weddings.
Oh, yeah. I think it's definitely getting into wedding season. I have some bachelorette parties to go to, and also some weddings to attend. So you know what? I'm just the bridesmaid, never the bride right now.
At some point. But I mean, it's crazy because just coming off a year of it being a pandemic and so many weddings having to be moved left and right. So many people just opted to just make complete changes or got married secretly or whatever the case may be, because it was just, I don't know, I guess a traumatic situation when you got to keep changing it over and over and over again. So
exactly. I completely understand how that is, and I've gotten several save the dates.
Save the dates. And for next year, because some people have said, you know what, I don't want a pandemic wedding. So
I keep saving the dates.
So if people are asking today, a year from now, maybe we won't be in this mess because people are getting vaccinated. Yeah. All right, so it's also a perfect weekend to be in the kitchen what'd you say? Whipping like a stir fry? Anyway, today is World Flour Day, which recognizes the importance of this key ingredient in many of the foods that we actually eat. The celebration falls on the first day of spring because it's the time for planting wheat in the Northern Hemisphere. The Southern Hemisphere, it's the time for harvesting it. All around the world, flour provides daily sustenance for billions of people, being the main ingredient in bread, pasta, pizza, cakes, biscuits, and more. It's been a main staple of food for humans for thousands of years. Maybe you got some baking done today, baking a cake, a homemade loaf, or bread or cookies. Flour is even great to make a roux. It's a key ingredient in many sauces and soups. Share your flour-based creations on social media. # World Flour Day. What do you think the best thing you eat, Britt, that has flour in it?
That has flour? Probably like fried chicken, or I was thinking about a hot piece of fish right now.
Yeah, you know what?
You put the
and fried shrimp.
Yes.
Yeah, some cake.
Anything fried. It could be fried Oreos at this point.
Yes. Shouts out to the people we brought on for Entrepreneur Sunday. Theirs are the best. All right, so go bake a cake or something. That's going to do it for this hour of VNC Live. But stay with us. We have much more news, weather, sports, and entertainment.